People are writing me emails of, why are you spending so much time? He's not on the ballot. And it's because actually he is on the ballot. Everyone's on the ballot. Our future's on the ballot. Senator, the red line. You spend a lot of time on the red line. I want you to explain what it is, why it matters, why you did, and how it crippled us and it continues to haunt us.
Well, let me take a step back to the context of the red line to you. As I explained it only the strong, Barack Obama seemed to have a kind of a confused, ad hoc, improvisational approach to the so-called Arab Spring, when Arab peoples across the Middle East and North Africa rose up, many times making justified demands against repressive governments. But if you look for a coherent theme in his response, it's actually pretty simple to find. If you were pro-American, which Egypt was, which Libya by 2011 de facto was, then you got toppled and overthrown. If you were anti-American, like Bashar al-Assad in Syria, and pro-Iran, then you were appeased and coddled. So Obama went, even after he withdrew support for Hosni Mubarak in Egypt and Muammar Gaddafi in Libya within days, he went months without saying anything about Assad in Syria. Finally, he was shamed into taking some rhetorical action at least, and he drew what he called a red line if chemical weapons were used in Syria in 2012, the height of the campaign. And about a year later, in my first months in Congress, that's exactly what happened in the summer of 2013. And at that point, he had to enforce his red line. You may not agree with the red line. You may think that it was unwise to draw. I personally think that presidents should very, very sparingly do things like draw red lines. But once they're drawn, they have to be enforced ruthlessly. As Bob Gates said, he always recommended presidents not draw red lines. But once you cock the weapon, you have to fire it when someone crosses the red line. And Obama didn't. He didn't launch the exact kind of airstrikes into Syria that he had done to Libya just a couple years earlier without congressional authorization. He was looking for someone to blame and to bail him out because he was still pursuing his grand ideological plan with Iran, and he didn't want to strike Bashar al-Assad, Iran's client in Syria. So he called Congress back into session. He asked Vladimir Putin to bail him out. Vladimir Putin gave him a fig leaf, saying that he was going to remove Syria's chemical weapons, and then he withdrew the resolution from Congress. And he thought that was a big victory. It was an absolute strategic catastrophe. I can't tell you how many leaders, not just from the Arab world, but all around the world, cited the red line fiasco for years to me as because it so deeply undermined American credibility. As I explained in Only the Strong, you can have the world's strongest military. You can have a deep and abiding set of alliances with friendly nations. But if the American president's word is not credible, America is at risk.
You know, I want you to expand on this because there are many memorable anecdotes in Only the Strong. The one which has probably already made headlines, and maybe it's been figured out by many people who read it. An Arab head of state managed to arrange for you to meet them at a different place than where you were supposed to be so that the Obama ambassador would be cut out and they could speak candidly to you. How often do you think that happened across the world where people looked at each other and said, we cannot count on America anymore? I mean, I just think it must have happened everywhere.
Yeah, it's quite a scene. I mean, we when you travel overseas as a senator, you don't necessarily expect to meet with the head of state. You meet with our people on our embassies. Sometimes you meet with cabinet ministers. Sometimes you meet with the head of state. Sometimes you don't. We did not plan to on this trip, but we got a last-minute request. This ruler offered to send his very nice helicopter to fly us, and at the last minute, as I write in Only the Strong, changed the meeting location, and for about 45 minutes excoriated President Obama and the red line. And then our ambassador came in, rushing, disheveled, apologizing. She didn't know that the location had changed. And I realized that he had done that on purpose because for the next 45 minutes, he was the picture of diplomacy and tact, very thankful for everything the Obama administration had done to help his nation.
But you know why that matters? That's the way the world works. They don't tell reporters what they really think. What they really think is what they see and what it means for their country. I think Only the Strong's great strength is that it's a real look at how rulers really react, and we've got to start thinking this way. I want to move very quickly to President Trump. There's a lot of interesting stuff about President Trump's foreign policy. When he decided to kill Soleimani, did he do the right thing?
No question, Hugh. We should have done it long before. I mean, just to give you a contrast between the perception of American power during the Trump era versus the Obama era. In the Obama era, Qasem Soleimani had long since abandoned the operational security measures he took during the Bush era. He was a social media phenomenon when Barack Obama was president, posting selfies and videos of himself across the Middle East. He did that because he was confident that he would never be killed by death from the sky. Donald Trump, corrected that misimpression of his. He was a terrorist mastermind. It's hard to overstate his influence inside Iran, probably second only to the supreme leader. He was in charge of an organization that would be akin to combining our Delta Force and our Navy SEALs and our CIA and our NSA. It made Americans a lot safer. And there were cries from both the left and even some on the right that this was going to lead to another endless war. We're going to invade Iran, that we're at war with Iran. It didn't lead to that. It increased our safety because Iran was not foolish enough to go to war with America when we were led by a president who had a clear-eyed view of our interests. As I explained earlier, strong, the same thing happened under Ronald Reagan. When Iran was mining the Persian Gulf and shooting missiles at oil tankers during the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, the first message that President Reagan sent to them was blowing up one of their platforms that had been used for intelligence collection on a missile that had struck a U.S. flagged ship. And a reporter.
I'm so proud of that chapter, by the way. I'm just, as a Reagan administration alum, I was over at OPM at the time. I'd left the White House. But you really gave Reagan his credit for taking out the Iran. I mean, it was beautifully done. Praying Mantis, is that the name of the operation? Yeah, it just was.
And a reporter asked Ronald Reagan after that first strike, "Are we at war with Iran now?" He chuckled in his way and said, "No, we're not at war with Iran. They're not that stupid."
When we come back with Senator Cotton. Welcome back, America. Senator Tom Cotton is back with me. Throughout this week of election coverage, I've been weaving in my interview with Senator Cotton about his brand new book, Only the Strong, and urging you to go out and get it, because when we win the majority, and we meaning the Republican Party, we got to use it. And Senator, you spend a lot of time talking about military readiness. Is it possible to undo the damage of Obama and Biden? And by that I mean, Bob Gates got fooled. Bob Gates is not easily fooled. Bob Gates is one of the smartest guys in America. He got fooled by Obama's promise. We are left with a hollowed-out military. Ronald Reagan inherited the same thing. Can a Republican Congress repair this?
Yeah, no, there's no question, Hugh, that we can begin the repair work. Now, ultimately, it's going to take a new president, a new Secretary of Defense dedicated to rebuilding our military. We had a small temporary blip in military spending increase in the Trump era, but that was largely just to fill the holes under the Obama era, which had brought our military down to dangerously low levels of readiness. So the first thing we need to do is simply increase our defense budget substantially, increase it substantially over the high rate of inflation we have now. We are getting closer to where we were spending our defense budgets where we were in the Carter era than we have been at any other time. The second thing we have to do is make sure that we're investing in the right things. I've seen too many politicians in Congress and frankly, too many admirals and generals who are convinced, in the latest kind of whiz-bang technology and suddenly war is going to be won with hashtags and keystrokes. Don't get me wrong, technology is very important, but it's battlefield technology that makes the difference. Battlefield technology in the hands of soldiers, or that sailors can take across the seas, or that airmen can fly into battle. So we have to invest in the right things. One thing we really have to invest on that we've talked about a few times this week is increasing the rate of productions for our munitions. These are not stealth aircraft. They're not aircraft carriers. They can be built in relatively short time frames if we give our defense industry the certainty and the funding it needs to increase its production rates. These are all steps that we need to take to give our military the resources it needs. But we also have to focus on the training. Democrats are deeply ambivalent about American power, which means they're mistrustful, as I explained in Only the Strong, about the American military. Because the military is American power at its hardest edge. Not the only kind of power. It's not the kind of power we prefer to use if we can help it, but it's the hardest form of American power. And that's why Democrats are making our troops go through these Maoist struggle sessions about critical race theory or transgender ideology, while they have so many politically correct pursuits that they impose on our troops. They engage in social engineering throughout the ranks. All that can be turned around, though, with a new president and a new Secretary of Defense.
You know, Senator, you're always more clear-eyed than I am, and a little more hard-edged than I am. I always put it down to Democrats doing the easy thing. You know, they'd rather not kill people, so that let's train them on gender diversity. They'd rather not get into an argument. But there's also the Roman Catholic doctrine of invincible ignorance, which is you can't condemn people because they're too stupid about something. When I see Ben Rhodes show up at Fidel Castro's funeral, I realize he really doesn't have any idea what Castro did to people, or he's indifferent to human pain and suffering. When I see Joe Biden talking about the evils around the world that can be overcome by cheerleading, I just don't think they understand. Am I being too generous? Do they understand and don't care, or do they not understand?
I think, again, it gets back to some of the philosophical and ideological roots of American decline on the left that we discussed earlier this week. If you reject America's founding and the moral basis of our country, if you think that human nature is somehow changeable, that it can be perfected, that we can achieve heaven on earth, that we can return to the garden this side of heaven, then you are easily duped by ruthless, bloodthirsty dictators like Xi Jinping or Fidel Castro or the Ayatollahs. If you add on to that the deep ambivalence about America, open hostility to American power that the New Left gave to us in the 1960s and 1970s, you get what you just described. Democrats who fall prey to especially left-wing dictators. Remember, it's never pro-American, right-wing strongmen. It's always left-wing, anti-American dictators. And they, in effect, simply surrender to them. Look at Barack Obama's deal with Cuba. It was actually worse than the deal with Iran. I mean, if you just read the terms of it, you would have thought that Cuba had defeated us in a war because we got absolutely nothing in return. We gave them everything. But that gets back to the ideological roots of the Democratic Party and their views about American power.
Now, this segment, we got 3 minutes. I want to talk about the American military. We'll come back and wrap this up about going forward in China. The American military is captained by very brave people. They've often served in combat, but they are all very political. And I regularly get missives from retired general officers. And people know, full disclosure, I have a son, son-in-law, and nephew on active duty. None of them are general officers. I'm not talking about them. I get regular emails from retired general officers who say that the senior ranks of the military has become too politicized. Do you believe that? How do we fix it?
I believe in some cases it has. I don't want to paint with a broad brush and say it's everyone, but in some cases it has. Sometimes you have senior military leaders who are trying to appeal to shifting political winds, and they believe that's what they need to advance in the Biden administration. Or they see the permanent bureaucracy in the Pentagon, which needs to be badly pared back, like most places, tends to lean to the left. But again, the military, thankfully, is different from any other bureaucracy in our government. There is a chain of command. There is a uniform code of military justice, and you can impose certain standards down to the front lines. I write in Only the Strong how we went through various kinds of training, non-tactical training, once every 6 months, once a year, things like motorcycle safety or smoking cessation. Part of that was equal opportunity training as well. And back in those days, 15 years ago, it was simply reminding our troops that we have a zero tolerance policy for racial or sexual discrimination or harassment of any kind. That's what we need to get back to. A new Secretary of Defense could say that. In fact, he could write his own PowerPoint slide and say, this is the new EO policy guidance for the military. It will be briefed down to troops once every 6 months, once every 12 months. Any command that uses something different will have the commander relieved immediately. If that were to happen to you, I bet you wouldn't have any more critical race theory sessions in our military. And if you did, there'd be consequences immediately.
From your lips to the next SecDef's ears. Don't go anywhere, America. When we come back, we're going to talk about China with Senator Cotton on the next segment of the Only the Strong series. Get out and vote. Boy, we are at the break. Hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt live inside the Beltway on this Thursday, the third day of November in the year of our Lord 2022. Adam Laxalt's going to win in Nevada. He's going to be the new U.S. Senator there. But he's running through the tape. Yesterday, we got the latest poll. I believe it's Susquehanna. And it's actually Hill Emerson. The Hill says that Adam Laxalt's ahead by 5 points. He joins us now. Adam, how are you tonight?
We're on the bus tour as we speak, and we're going to barnstorm the state right till the end.
You know, when even John Ralston, who is not your friend and no longer an objective journalist, he's sort of an activist, but even John has kind of all but admitted you've won this thing. Are you surprised by that?
Look, we're not taking anything for granted. I can tell you the spend. They've dumped millions more dollars in these final 2 weeks, doing whatever they can to salvage Senator Cortez Masto. They brought in Barack Obama last night and John Legend. And so do I think it's going to work? No. But I really want nobody to take this for granted. We got to match this. We got to fight till the end. And AdamLaxalt.com for anybody that's willing to help. But we do feel good. We've run.
Yeah, far from telling anyone to not run through the tape, I want people who are going home from work right now in Las Vegas to go vote early. I really want the union workers, Latinos, blacks, people who don't normally vote Republican or generally considered to be captive special interests of the Democrats, to just evidence their disgust, Adam Laxalt. Nevada has been crushed by this presidency.
Yeah, that's all I could say to people is I hope you're not buying the almost $100 million of literally complete and false lies and ads. They have no message. She has nothing to run on. She has no accomplishments in 13 years of public office in this state. So all they could do is try to burn me to the ground, but it's not working. And all the people need to do is look at the state of our economy, look at our law enforcement issues, look at what our open border is doing to our great state of Nevada. I'm just driving through rural Nevada now. Record fentanyl pullovers in the last few weeks, 200 pounds in these small rural communities. Those are starting in Las Vegas, by the way, and making their way through the state, coming right from the border. And so we've got to get a hold of this thing. We've got only one way to do it, a check on the Biden administration for the next 2 years. And Senator Cortez Masto has been voting with him nearly 100% of the time. And if we want change, at least the start of change, we've got to take back the Senate, and we got to start reversing this trend.
Last night, the president gave a so-called speech at Union Station, Adam. Some of the reactions, Rich Lowry, partisan malice aside, this speech is a baggy mess of cliche. Katie Pavlik, Biden claiming we don't settle our political differences with riots is a complete wiping of what happened during the 2020 presidential election. Eric Erickson, the president's speech will ramp up Republican turnout even more. If Hassan loses New Hampshire, it's this speech putting the final nail in her coffin. David Limbaugh, this guy's a dangerous demagogue. You know I'm right. David Harsanyi, despicable speech from a despicable president. He went way over the top last night, and I think he's lost the dial, Adam Laxalt, meaning I think the filters are down, and we've got an 80-year-old angry guy who's looking at a defeat in his face who's just striking out at people.
Yeah, look, they're just so out of touch, and I think they're in these cocoons, and they believe this craziness, and somehow they think attacking half, or I would argue over half, as we're about to find out, of our electorate, he keeps demonizing. He thinks that's a closing message. He could do the State of the Union 7 days a week, as far as I'm concerned, and we're still waiting for the Senator Cortez Masto Biden invite to help her close this thing out. I'm sure we're going to hold our breath all the way through election on that one.
You know, he's turning up in Chicago, Adam Laxalt, because the president is only welcome to where the dead vote, and they've got to get out the dead in Chicago. It really is kind of a sad situation for Cortez Masto, but it's her own bed that she's made. She could have stood up on any vote, on the $2.2 trillion that started it off, on the $700 trillion additional spending this summer. She could have spoke out against the student loan guarantee. Has she broken with Biden on anything?
No, she continues to stand on open borders, on spending, on attacking American energy independence. It's all across the board, and you're absolutely right. She could have decided many years ago that she wanted to be Joe Manchin or Kirsten Sinema. We're a toss-up state, but she has been a reliable vote for him, and it's easy. Your listeners have never heard of her, and the reason they haven't is because she's never broken from the party. We all know that if she broke, you know, she'd be in the company of Joe Manchin. And by the way, the only reason I'm even talking about it is because she spent $90 million trying to lie to voters and pretend like she's been independent. But she has been that reliable vote. We wish she would have stood up against Joe Biden. She was the 51st vote. She could have stopped the most recent inflation spending bill. We're already at 16%. We already have almost $6 gas. But, of course, reliable vote, just rubber stamp. And so this is why we're winning this race, and this is why we're going to win on election night.
Just a little peek inside Nevada, because I'm not familiar. My friends have been in Nevada a lot for election work, like Ambassador O'Brien and Rick Grinnell, et cetera. But I'm curious, do you get it together early enough on election night that we'll find out fairly quickly, or is Nevada, like California, one of the states that takes forever to poll?
You know, I guess we're going to find out. In the primary, it took a few hours
That's
for
not
our
bad.
Secretary of State to release the first set of numbers. So, yeah, we could be waiting until 9 p.m. or later Pacific to get at least the first dump. And, you know, we could easily know after early vote. We're tracking these numbers. They look pretty good for Republicans today. We'll have a much clearer picture on Friday. That's the end of early vote. And then we'll be waiting the 4 days until Election Day. And so, you know, we're happy to report back on that once we've got those final early vote numbers. But so far, they look good. And we need people just to keep turning out. I'm the only candidate doing all 17 counties right now on our bus. No communities too small. We're doing the metros, of course. And we're just going to just go right till November 8th.
Two last questions, Adam. The first one is Las Vegas and Reno versus the rest of the state in terms of population. What percentage of the Nevada population live in the two big metro areas, and what's the rural population?
A lot.
Good.
Good. 65 to 75, depending on the turnout, is in the Las Vegas area. About 10 to 15 in the Reno area. Rurals make up between 10 to 15, all depending on who's turning out, what the margins are. But we will bank 50,000 or more votes from rural Nevada. So far, our numbers look good in Vegas. One, the turnout isn't particularly high, but because we've been so competitive with Hispanic vote down there, you know, we're inside 10, which is the magic number. And, again, we feel good. The numbers look good. The polling looks good. As long as our people get out to vote, then we're going to win this race.
Okay, it's 96 hours left. I always tell people if they've got $5, $50, $100 less, pick a candidate where it matters. I think that's AdamLaxalt.com. Am I right?
AdamLaxalt.com. It's going right out the door, and it's all about making sure we leave no vote behind and make sure we get our folks out. You can also find out all the remaining stops and surrogates coming into town if you want to join us along the trail.
And finally, Adam Laxalt, the veterans show up. You're a Navy veteran. I just want people to know that. It is worth many points in my book, but are the veterans showing up at your stops?
Oh, absolutely. You know, we've got about 300,000 veterans in the state, and I'm the only Navy and Iraq veteran in this race. They know that I did a lot for them when I was Attorney General. And look, veterans we need veterans in Congress. That number has dropped to all-time lows. We know we're having trouble with the military. We know we've got Navy SEALs that were unnecessarily kicked out because they refused to take a shot. We need a major reversal, and I hope I can be part of the trend of really holding the 4 stars accountable so that we can get our military back to military readiness and being able to fight and win wars.
Run through the tape, and thank you for joining me early. Adam Laxalt, have another good Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. I imagine you'll be working out on Tuesday, too. So find the inner reservoir of strength, and congratulations on a great campaign thus far. Run through the tape.
Thanks, Hugh.
Thank you, Adam Laxalt, next senator from... Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt live inside the Beltway. A couple of breaking news polls in the New Hampshire Senate. Trafalgar has Don Bolduc at 47%, Maggie Hassan at 45.7%. That's the first lead in the Trafalgar poll for Don Bolduc, who is surging. Also out of Pennsylvania, Dr. Oz with a 2-point lead now, which is a 6-point shift to Dr. Oz from August, when the last time Emerson polled the Keystone State. I'm joined now by Jim Banks. Congressman Banks is from Indiana. He is the chair of the Republican Study Group, likely to be the whip in the next House of Representatives. Good morning, Congressman Banks. Welcome back.
Hey, good morning, Hugh. Good to be with you.
Well, you hear these numbers out of New Hampshire and Pennsylvania. Those are state races. What do you know about the congressional races in the Granite State and the Keystone State?
Well, we're going to have lots of pickups in states like those, and Pennsylvania is a big pickup opportunity. 3-4 races that we'll win in Pennsylvania alone. I've been stumping all day yesterday. Hugh, I was in your old stomping grounds, Strongsville, Ohio, with Max Miller. I was in Port Clinton last night with J.D. Vance and J.R. Majewski. Big crowds showing up everywhere that I go in these heartland districts that are the precursor to what will be a red wave next Tuesday.
Now, in your own state of Indiana, I think the reason Joe Biden is going to Chicago, which is kind of idiocy for a Democratic president to close in Chicago, is to try and help whoever Jen Ruth Green's going to beat. Am I right about that? Is that just an attempt to play into the northwestern corner of Indiana?
Well, it's a district, Hugh, that Democrats have owned for 92 years. It'll be the biggest story of the night if we flip a Democrat district like that one and get Jennifer Ruth Green elected. I'll be with her later this evening campaigning in her district. This is the quintessential Democrat district that's become more Republican. It's the biggest steelworker district in the country. It's a union, heavy union district, blue collar. Those voters in districts like that one have figured out over the last few years that Democrats no longer represent working class values, that Republicans are more focused on the kitchen table issues that blue collar voters care about. I mean, that's why that district, for the first time in 92 years, is in play. Plus, we have an exceptional candidate, Jennifer Ruth Green, a Iraq War veteran, happens to be African American, with a big heart and a great message, and she's on the cusp of making history. I think it'll be the biggest. She's my favorite candidate in the country, and on the cusp of making history because of a great campaign and a big opportunity. But it's telling again because of districts like that one and the makeup of the voters in districts like that one all over the country that are coming our way that are going to give us a historic election night.
Now, Jim, I want to go out, if I can, to California, where old friend of mine, Scott Baugh, who I've literally known for 30 years. And Scott was a terrific state legislator. He's been a terrific chairman of the Republican Party in Orange County. Somebody talked him into running against Katie Porter back before it was obvious that this was going to be a red wave. And Scott dutifully got into it. He doesn't need the job. He'll be a great congressman. What do you hear about that? Because Katie Porter is a nightmare. She really ought not to be living on the public dime in public housing on the campus of the University of California, Irvine. I think it's going to catch up with her.
Yeah, these are late-breaking races. I had Scott's name written down in front of me. Another one is Mac Jacobs in a nearby district in California. These are two districts that people weren't talking about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Now all of a sudden, either their polling is neck and neck, or our candidates are slightly ahead, and they're getting a lot of attention and a lot of late-breaking funding. But Scott Ball is another one, just a genuine guy, a great conservative. Club for Growth has been supporting him all along the way and helping him fund his campaign up to this point, but now he's getting some late-breaking support. So this is why the predictions about winning 20 seats, up until a week or two ago, but now with the momentum on our side, I mean, it could be a night where we do double that, Hugh, because we got candidates like Scott Ball winning and pulling ahead here at the end of the wire.
My over-under has always been 25 because I try and be close to where I think it's going to end up and make the over-under interesting, and the Republicans +1 in the Senate. And all the money's coming in at the over now on both those numbers. And that's great news. I want to talk to you about the last 96 hours of a campaign. People don't understand there's a science to this. Bill Owen, back in Colorado, when he was governor of Colorado, started the 96-hour project. That's when he named me warden of the Collegiate Peaks. And they had a methodical approach to the last 96 hours of a campaign, which begins tomorrow. Congressman Banks, do you see that in the rookie campaigns, that they've got a 96-hour plan?
Yeah, all the good ones do. I mean, Bill Owens, one of the best governors we've ever had in America, coined it right. I mean, this is when you go out and get out the vote. And this get out the vote rally I was at in Port Clinton, Ohio last night with J.D. Vance and J.R. Majewski, it felt like a Donald Trump rally. with hundreds of their supporters, and that's the whole point. Take a yard sign when you go out the door, but then go get out the vote. Go dial down into the weeds of your precincts and turn out the vote. And in an election cycle like this, where we have the outpouring of grassroots support, it's making phone calls, it's knocking on doors, all the way up until the point when the polls close on Tuesday evening. So the good campaigns, the sophisticated campaigns, they've got this under control, and it's not too late for some of the other campaigns to dial in on this and make a difference too. But you got to have the momentum on your side, the excitement, and in all of these races on our side, the momentum, excitement, and the grassroots support, it clearly tilts in the Republican favor.
Adam Laxalt is coming up at the top of the hour. He is my number one. Okay, last-minute contributions make him to Nevada because that's the crookedest state in the union when it comes to get out the vote. And so I want Adam to have some resources. If I was going to make a last-minute contribution to the House, I'd probably give it to Juan Ciscomani in Tucson, Arizona. Where would you send it, Jim Banks?
Well, I would send it to Jennifer Ruth Green. I mean, just a great candidate and really a neck-and-neck race. There are a lot of them across the board that are worth contributing to, but she's a special project for me and a great candidate.
All right, let me finish by talking about the president's really insulting speech last night. First of all, there is no threat to democracy. Secondly, if he wanted to address it, he would go back to the original sin of the January 6th non-committee when Nancy Pelosi vetoed you as the ranking member, Jim Jordan as a member, and placed two of her hand-picked Republicans on the... It's not really a committee. Jim Banks, when the president doesn't talk about that, and when the media doesn't talk about that, they legitimize what should not be legitimate, which is the abuse of power by the speaker against the minority. Do you think that matters to anyone out there, that this is all a fraud? It's just literally a fraud.
Yes, it matters to so many Americans. They see it for what it is, and that's why the Democrats have a hard time addressing it, because they know that they're on the wrong side of history. They know that they abused the powers of the House of Representatives, and when we get the gavels back and control the House in January, we have to right those wrongs, and we have to make sure that we repair the destruction to the institutions that the Democrats have gone out of their way to cause over the last couple of years. So I hear about it everywhere that I go, Hugh. But every time that the president is on TV giving a divisive message like he did last night, is a reminder to the American people that the Democrats do not care about inflation. They do not care about crime. They do not care about drugs pouring into our communities. They do not care that you're paying more at the gas pump, and that's the fact of the matter. This is the biggest kitchen table issue election of my lifetime, that the American people recognize that one party's talking about what we care about, and the other party's talking about something completely different.
So, Congressman, I keep asking people. I'm going to ask you. We get a new House majority, a new Senate majority. What can the Republicans actually do? They'll own one half of the lawmaking ability. And that is not, the president's got the veto. It's not going to be a veto-proof Congress. One half. What can be advanced? I mean, there'll be a select committee on China. I hope the new speaker sets up a select committee for 90 days on the last 90 days of Afghanistan, because I would like to get some focus on that. But in the general regular order, what do you think the Republicans do first?
Well, of course, there's going to be oversight and investigations of Afghanistan, a lot of other issues. But legislatively, we have to use our leverage when it comes to spending deals, when it comes to the debt limit. There will be an opportunity for using reconciliation for one piece of legislation, and Speaker to-be McCarthy has already made it clear that our reconciliation opportunity, our H.R. 1, will be an energy independence bill. And I think that's what the American people are looking for us to do, to address that. If we can push that, use reconciliation, put a bill on the president's desk that would bring down our gas prices, that's what they're hiring us to do first and foremost, to address those issues that affect them the most. And I think we'll have opportunities to do that, and we have to be bold enough to use it.
Congressman, now this is an important question. I ask everybody in the leadership, whether it's going to be future Speaker McCarthy or future Majority Leader Scalise or future Whip Banks, or whether it's Leader McConnell or Deputy or Republican Whip Thune, Will the Republicans move fast? Because the last time they took the Congress, they farted around for, pardon my French, they screwed around for 4 months before they got their budget together. They ought to have that done in 48 hours. I mean, they really ought to hammer out the reconciliation and be ready to pass it on day one and then jam through appropriation bills. And we really cannot screw around. Will there be urgency on the Republican side?
Yeah, there has to be. And this is why I like Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House. Kevin's been the minority leader. He's been the majority leader. He's been the whip. He's been the chief deputy whip. I don't know that if you go back and study American history that we've ever had a Speaker of the House who will have had all of that experience that Kevin McCarthy is going to come into the House as the Speaker of the House, knowing how to operate, knowing how to push. And there is a lot of pent-up frustration and ambition in the House Republican Conference because we've seen how much the Democrats have bogged down the process, how much the frustrating way that they've run the House, that we all have ideas about how to do it better and differently. So we are ready to go, Hugh. I think it's an important point. We've anticipated the majority over the last couple of years. We've been preparing for it, and we know we have to move quickly.
I'm so glad to hear that. Very last question. Will you and the Speaker and everybody else end remote voting? It is a scandal that the members of the House are not in D.C. to vote.
There's no question about it. It's a pledge that McCarthy and our leadership team has already made. Remote voting will end the day that Republicans take over the House.
Jim Banks, keep coming back. I love talking to someone who's out there. Jen Ruth Green, America. Go out and support her. Go out and support Juan Ciscomani everywhere. Get out there and run through the tape. 96.